Forget everything you think you know about Vikings. For 1,000 years, the island of Berk wasn't a home. It was a fortress. It was a scar carved into the northern seas, populated by men and women whose blood ran colder than the ice that surrounded them. Their defining characteristic? Stubbornness. Their greatest and only enemy? Dragons. This is not a fairy tale. This is the origin story of a revolutionary. Every 9 days, the sky would blacken, not with clouds, but with wings. Monstrous, relentless raids that cost the village its food, its sleep, and its limbs. They were born into war. They ate war. They breathed the smoke of war. Their chief, Stoic the Vast, embodied this legacy, a giant of a man, roaring defiance at the heavens, his battle axe always red. But the future of Berk rested on a boy who, quite frankly, looked like a mistake. Meet Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, the only Viking on Berk who had to use a toothpick instead of a battle axe. He was too small, too clever, and far too sarcastic for their brutal world. He was a failure in the fighting pit, a liability on the battlefield. His father's deep, booming shame hung over him like the perpetual storm clouds. He didn't want to kill dragons. He just desperately wanted to be seen, to belong, to finally stop being the disappointment that almost everyone, including himself, believed he was. During the latest siege, while the real warriors were roaring at gronkles and natters, Hiccup hid. He was armed not with a sword, but with an impossible machine. A bola launcher designed to take down the one, the only, the undisputed deadliest dragon, the Night Fury. No one had ever seen it. They only knew its sound, a high-pitched whine followed by a blast of purple fire. And that night, Hiccup's desperate contraption worked. He heard the telltale screech of impact, followed by the distant, sickening crash. He had done the impossible. But he kept it secret. The next morning, driven by a need for proof and validation, Hiccup tracked the crash site. He found it, a hidden cove, and the Night Fury trapped in his ropes, its coal-black scales shimmering, its eyes wide with raw, animal fury. But when Hiccup raised his tiny knife, something broke. He looked into those beautiful, intense green eyes, and he couldn't do it. He didn't see a monster. He saw a wounded creature. He saw the very same fear and loneliness he felt every single day. He cut the ropes, and the dragon, incapable of flight, merely roared and vanished into the shadows. This was the true turning point. Instead of boasting, Hiccup became an observer. He returned to the cove, bringing not weapons, but fish. He saw the dragon, whom he named Toothless for his retractable teeth, struggling to fly because a segment of its tail wing was destroyed. For weeks they engaged in a dangerous dance of trust. Hiccup learned that dragons weren't mindless killers. They played, they purred. They were motivated by simple things like good fish and a clean, fresh scratch under the chin. He began designing a prosthetic tail fin, knowing he was committing treason with every rivet and every measurement. While Hiccup was secretly mastering flight with Toothless, the rest of the village enrolled him in Dragon Training Academy. Now, here is the irony. The boy who couldn't fight was suddenly a genius at subduing dragons. He wasn't using strength. He was using Toothless's lessons. He learned where dragons love to be scratched, how to use their fear of eels, and how to deflect their fire by simply using a mirror. He was hailed as a prodigy, the son Stoic always dreamed of, beating the fiercely competitive Astrid at every turn. The respect he craved was finally his. Hiccup had everything he wanted except the truth. The lie grew heavy. He was slated to kill, a captive monstrous nightmare in the final test, the ultimate act of Viking manhood. He couldn't do it. The shame of disappointing his father, the fear of exposing Toothless, the weight of the lie, it all pressed down on him. The irony was suffocating. He was a hero because he was secretly a traitor. Astrid, suspicious of Hiccup's sudden success and intense secrecy, followed him. She discovered the truth, the cove, the prosthetic, and the beautiful, terrifying bond between boy and night fury. Her reaction was pure Viking horror. She ran to tell Stoic. In a desperate plea for Toothless's life, Hiccup had to show her the secret of the skies. The flight with Astrid was breathtaking, but it ended with a terrifying discovery. Toothless didn't just take them flying. He took them to the dragon nest, and what they saw there shattered centuries of Berkonian dogma. Dragons weren't stealing livestock for themselves. They were tribute. Every dragon brought food to a single colossal alpha, the Red Death, a tyrannical queen, larger than a mountain, who devoured any dragon that failed to feed her. The war wasn't against dragons. It was a war for them. Hiccup's plea to Stoic was too late. He revealed the night fury and the nest's location, hoping to stop the centuries-old cycle of violence. But Stoic only saw betrayal. He saw his son side with the enemy. Toothless was captured and chained to the lead ship, forced to guide the entire Viking fleet to the nest. In one devastating moment, Hiccup lost his father's pride, his dragon, and his entire life. The Vikings sailed to war, armed with ignorance. The raid on the nest was a disaster. The Vikings' primitive weapons were useless against the Red Death, whose raw power was devastating. They were trapped, resigned to failure. But then the cavalry arrived. Hiccup, along with Astrid and the entire group of young Viking apprentices, flew in on their now-tamed dragons. It was the ultimate defiance. They didn't come to kill. They came to save. The final battle became a desperate aerial ballet. Hiccup and Toothless, free again thanks to Stoic's momentary distraction, faced the Red Death alone. They used agility, speed, and cleverness, the very traits the Vikings had always scorned, to lure the massive beast into the sky. Their goal wasn't to outfight the monster, but to outwit it. In a blazing, fiery climax, they sacrificed Toothless's prosthetic to deliver the final devastating blow. They won. The Red Death was gone, but Hiccup and Toothless crashed into the inferno. Stoic, who had nearly lost his son, found the night fury protecting an unconscious Hiccup in the smoking wreckage. In that moment, the Viking chief finally understood. He finally saw the truth his son had always known. The war was over. Hiccup awoke to a different Berk. He was no longer the disappointment. He was a hero. And though he had lost his lower leg in the battle, a symbol of the high price of change, he had gained something priceless, a world reborn. He and Toothless, now both equally disabled yet entirely complete, took their first flight over the new Berk. Dragons were no longer invaders. They were pets, partners, and friends. The story of Hiccup is the story of choosing empathy over inheritance, of choosing a whisper of truth over 1,000 years of shouting lies. He didn't become the strong Viking his father wanted. He became the gentle, revolutionary leader Berk truly needed. And all it took was one unlikely friendship to change the entire world.